Hi, this is Diane Devitt, and this is a continuing series in the world of food and catering. I'm excited to welcome you here with me today. I have a very special guest speaker, Steven Zagor. Steven, did you know that? Special speaker of the day.
I can't believe it. I feel like the daily special.
Well, you are. Well, that's a good way to look at it, right?
You're trying to use me up because I'm about to go bad, or I must be a good test.
Are you to go? Do I take a brown bag? Well, we'll get to that in a few minutes. But you know, I always like to start out these talks, and it's because it's so interesting. People who are in the profession for so long about where they started. So I'm going to just ask you that. Like, how did this all come about? Tell us how Steven got involved in the world of food.
Well, I think if you look back at my high school yearbook and everybody says what would they like to become at some point, my high school clearly states that I wanted to own a restaurant, a steak restaurant. I was very specific, which I never did.
Steak.
But a restaurant.
Okay.
All of my other classmates wanted to be doctors, lawyers, save the world, create the next cure for cancer or something like that. I wanted to open up a restaurant, so I was very specific in what I wanted to do. That being said, the day, the time, you never really wanted to go to college or school to study hotels or restaurants or anything like that. It just wasn't appropriate. And so I went off and started to become a lawyer, but my family background is from the South. My family is from South Carolina.
Oh, I was going to ask you. All right.
And I grew up with all of these incredible home cooks who would take ingredients that who knew in the day they were fresh. Everything was fresh. You never knew anything that was canned or anything that was prepared in advance. And they would turn these masterpieces from the kitchen. And it was great. And then we would constantly go out, because my family has always been a huge eating out family. And we would go out and we would eat in these different restaurants all over the country and sometimes all over the world.
When you were a young boy?
And when I was young. And then as I got older, I started to realize I had some distant relatives who were in the restaurant business.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, a very famous restaurant here in New York was my god-uncles. And they adopted me as somebody that used to go to the restaurant with them.
Oh, okay.
And go behind the scenes and watch it. And I loved the theatrics. I loved the food. I loved the smells. I loved the fact that there were so many interesting people, so many interesting guests. It just was this.
It's really theater, isn't it?
It was the theater.
It's theater of it all, isn't it?
But it was touched you with the food. It touched you with the scent. It touched you with the creativity. And the people were so interesting. The whole thing was totally addicting, and I realized that's what I wanted to do, was be in the restaurant business. So I grabbed my sister one day, not literally, of course. Nowadays, she would sue me.
Right, exactly.
Doesn't matter. And I said, let's go downstairs. I was living in Manhattan. Let's go downstairs. So we went in the toaster oven. We put a bunch of hot dogs in the toaster oven, put them in a bag, went downstairs and tried to sell them on the street, and that didn't work too well. I realized there was more to it than meet the eye.
So you grew up, you're a New York boy?
I'm a New York City person, grew up
in Manhattan?
In Manhattan, yes. I sure did.
Because, you know, I think growing up in Manhattan, I mean, you just walk in 2 blocks and you have 10 choices of ethnic cuisine and different styles. And I'm going to speak like a jaded New Yorker, because I'm sorry, I just think the food here is probably some of the best in the world.
It is. At
any time. And even the less expensive food, right? So so it's interesting. But you know, I know you're involved with so many things right now in the culinary world. Dean of the Institute of Culinary Education, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But aside from that, like with your other roles in consulting, you're in all areas of food, Steve. And I think that's one thing I'd like to point out to people is that it's not just one. You know, people think food, they think food service, but they don't know the world of restaurants and catering. And so can you give us a little perspective on your involvement in those?
Okay. Well, the thing that I had that really was my platform was that I had a terrific foundation. I did end up going to Cornell Hotel School.
Okay.
And I ended up getting a master's degree, in fact, from Cornell Hotel School, one of the very first master's classes that they were back around 1830.
Because I know Cornell was one of the first, right? Now, didn't Washington have something to do like with laying the first brick or something?
George, no, it was Abe.
Oh, Abe. Okay, Abe Washington.
Abe was the one that told me to continue my studies at Cornell. And I said, Abe, I'll tell you what, I'll stop wearing the top hat. You wear the top hat, I'll stick with the baseball hat. And so I went through Cornell, and that was my industry, basically, foundation.
Foundation, right.
And then after a short time working in the industry, I had the very excellent opportunity to open a restaurant.
Oh, okay.
And I was able to do that, and I lived in Texas at the time, and I opened a great restaurant in Texas.
Where in Texas?
In Houston.
Oh, in Houston, okay.
And we hit the Grand Slam home run. I mean, we made a fortune, and it was an incredible success.
Was it steak?
No, it was actually sort of like Cheesecake Factory in Texas.
Oh,
it was
interesting.
a breakfast, lunch, dinner, 300 seats.
Okay.
It was a mix of New York food and Texas food.
Oh.
It was totally unfocused, and by every determination should have failed, except it was a great location. It was modestly priced. We were somewhat creative for the area.
Sure.
And it hit Grand Slam home run. We were incredibly busy from day one. Then we opened up an off-premise catering business, which was gigantically successful. Then I had a second restaurant cafe with singing waiters, which was modestly unsuccessful. And
we're going to get to that later, by the way.
And then another restaurant. But so I had a really good foundation, and I had these all for many years. And so when we sold them, and when I went on to do consulting, which ultimately I worked with one of the big companies, now PricewaterhouseCoopers. In those days it was Coopers & Lybrand.
Coopers, right.
And I was involved with running the restaurant practice here in the area. I really had learned a lot. I learned from my own experience, I learned from academics, I learned from, in consulting, being behind the scenes from some of the greats and some of the most interesting people making money and losing money. So I had this incredible amount of knowledge that just came my way. And one day someone called and said, would you ever teach a class? And it was an adult education class. It was called the Class Factory, which later became the Learning Annex. And I said, sure, because I'm always been able to talk, and people think that I'm occasionally funny and creative and stuff.
You are.
And it became one of the most popular classes at the Learning Annex. I was doing this in Texas. And then, so I thought, this is kind of fun teaching. And then when the consulting business was over, or as I moved on in the consulting business, I got a call from someone at NYU and asked me if I would mind interested in teaching.
And that's how you
class.
transitioned. So that's how these three worlds came together.
That's
Well,
right.
It's been really interesting learning that about you, Steve. And I know we have a lot more to explore, but right now, thank you very much. And we're just going to wrap it up and say thank you for all your contributions in the industry.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'm not done yet.
I know you're not. Thank you.